Welcome to the Millennial Leader Podcast, where milk is for babies. Because when you grow up, you have to drink a beer. If you are a millennial who wants to challenge and lead this generation, you are in the right place. Yeah, here's your host, Carlos Reyes. Yeah.
All right, welcome Millennial Leaders to podcast number 8. What'd you think of that Arnold Schwarzenegger intro? I figured I'd mix it up and have some fun with this, so if you liked it, hated it, thought it was lame, let me know. I'd love to hear back from you. I also want to say thank you to those of you that have reached out and just given me a word of encouragement as I'm figuring out how to share this information with you, as I'm still trying to figure out my voice here on podcasts. I hope that I'm getting better over time. I'm really excited to share the conversation I had with Gabrielle Jackson. She is absolutely a millennial leader who loves millennials. She's an author, speaker, coach, and millennial strategist. She's actually the author of the book I'm holding in my hands, The 5 Millennial Myths. We had a great conversation not only about millennials, but about boomers and Gen Xers. I know you'll enjoy this conversation because Gabrielle has such great content to share with you. She knows what she's talking about, and you can tell in our conversation. And I tell my secret tip for all the Gen Xers and boomers out there, our Google secret tip. So, listen all the way to the end and make sure you get to that. All right, I'm going to shut up. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Millennial Leader Podcast with Carlos Reyes, encouraging and equipping a generation to lead.
All right, welcome, Gabrielle.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We got to know each other through some friends, and we really enjoy this subject. And so I'm excited to have you on with me today. Tell everybody a little bit about what you do, the organization that you founded, and we'll go from there.
Well, thanks so much again, Carlos. And it's always fun to connect with a fellow millennial nerd, just kind of sitting and talking about who we are as a generation and what makes us tick. Sometimes I think it's very millennial of us, isn't it? Just to want to sit around and talk about ourselves. But I'm from California, and I left my job out there working in the state legislature to move here to Virginia, actually, and help some friends start an online television network. And the problem with startups is that many of them don't really start up. So I began working as a full-time fundraiser out here, moved to the DC area, and pretty much just found myself as an accidental entrepreneur. I wasn't planning on starting a company this last year, but it just kind of happened seems like every industry I've been in, I've been the youngest person in the room, and I kind of became this apologist for millennials. Like, we're really not that bad. And so I just found this really large need to be able to understand who this next generation is. And so I created the Millennial Solution to be able to fix that need. So like you mentioned, I've written my book, 5 Millennial Myths, and I stay busy being able to go out and speak regularly on it, provide training and workshops to organizations on millennials and management, and do millennial life coaching as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you for writing this book. I had the opportunity this weekend to go through it, and I think you're right on the money on most of these things. I think when we spoke the other day, we agreed on a lot of these different things, but I would love to dive into this because I think one of the most valuable things you've presented in this book is, okay, we know these things, but what can millennials do, and what can those that manage millennials do? So I'd love to go through, if you're okay with that, and just start with the first one, this idea that millennials are entitled.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. So the first one in my book that I cover is this entitlement myth. And it's the first because it's the one that I find most often as I'm working with people across generations. When I ask them, like, so what do you think of when you look at millennials, and what's the largest challenge you face? And you guys are so entitled. You think just because you graduate from college, you walk across that platform and get a certificate that somehow you're entitled to a good paying job, or you get hired, therefore you're entitled to a raise. And so it's this sense that just because we're here, that we deserve. And so what I do in just the structure of my book is that I take the myth and then I separate the facts from the fiction, because the reality is that we're working with stereotypes, and there's truth behind many stereotypes that are out there, and there are many in our generation that are entitled. But what is it that how have we been conditioned to think that we are so deserving? And I think the biggest thing for us is that we have been so blessed by our parents and by our society in general to be encouraged to pursue our dreams, to think that we can do anything and we can achieve anything. And because of that, we have this almost overinflated sense of accomplishment, even though we haven't done it yet. I mean, how many of us got trophies just for showing up and being cute? And so not being able to understand what it means that hard work really is hard work. That's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now.
This idea, hard work is hard work across every generation. It doesn't skip a generation. And while some have figured out how to do it a bit differently, at the end of the day, you have to develop this work ethic and work hard. Actually, I believe Pew Research puts out a survey that surveys the generations and says, hey, what defines your generation? And I believe the boomers, the majority of them say hard work, if I'm correct in that. Yeah. And millennials, some millennials have said stuff like, my clothes. Of course, everybody's going, yeah, that's a typical millennial idea. So are we an entitled generation?
Yeah, well, funny that you brought up that Pew Research study. That what they actually found too is in the last couple of years, other than what has come to define us is technology. And it used to be that 9/11 was the most significant event in the millennials' life, and just recently our relationship with technology has taken over that, which is incredible. I mean, if you think about like our grandparents' generation, like with Pearl Harbor, that really defined them. But now we no longer have these major life events that are defining us. It's just our affinity to have things plugged in all of the time, which I find very interesting. But as to your question, are we entitled? What I like to say is entitlement for millennials is really ambition misdirected. We're incredibly ambitious. We want to save the world. We want to make a difference. We want to be a part of doing something great. We're incredibly ambitious, but we just need to have direction and mentorship. We need to have people around us to help us really direct that in a positive way.
You say in the book we need a generational GPS. Can you sort of explain that?
Yeah, this concept of, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I do not know how society functioned before GPS. We live in the DC area, and it is so confusing. I've got my GPS on constantly, and I've lived here for over a year now. I get lost on a one-way street. But I think as a generation, we really need to have that directional force from the inside out, as well as being able to have that support on the when it comes to people coming into our lives and helping us get direction, because we have so much energy, but oftentimes we just don't know what to do with it. We want to go when we want to do, and we even want to be someone, we want to be something. But I work with millennials all the time, and I'm like, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, I don't know, but I want to do something, I want to do something great, but they don't know what that is. Just trying to pick a major for college. That's sometimes the most difficult decision of your entire life is trying to choose what you're going to study for 4 years, because you think, oh my gosh, if I choose this one mode of study, then I'm going to be missing out on all of these other options. And so we need to have some sort of direction to move towards to help us make these individual decisions along the way.
It's funny you mentioned college majors, because I'm sure you remember most of our friends would start in one major and then 3 majors over. It's like, how did you get into that?
Or majoring in 4 different things at once and none of them particularly related.
Right. Oh, well, I want to be well-rounded. Well, you're going to be rounded in something. Oh,
trying to be an expert in everything all at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm absolutely guilty as well. You have one of the lines in here that stuck out, because we spoke about this the other day in speaking with boomers and millennials and just the generational differences. You say speed may be the currency of the millennial generation, but respect is the currency of the boomer generation. I just wrote a blog post that should be going live today about respect being the currency of the boomer generation. Tell me a little about your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, that respect is something that older generations understand because it's been taught to them that respect is earned. It was just a part of the American culture, really, is of respecting those that have gone before you, your elders, those who are experienced. If you have your name on the door of a corporation, it's because you worked hard to get there. And that's something that boomers, that was just part of their career trajectory, is that that there was a path. I mean, they talk about the corporate ladder. Well, it's a ladder. You have to, there are rungs for a reason, and there's hard work that gets there. And so in the boomer generation, you really respected those that were in leadership because you knew that they sacrificed a whole lot to get there. I mean, they sacrificed family vacations. They sacrificed time at home. And so there was a respect in that. But this generation, we're seeing with the Xers, as well as with the boomers, this different prioritization of what our lives look like. I was just at this entrepreneurship dinner with a couple other young entrepreneurs starting businesses, and these young women were talking about how they were like, well, no disrespect to the older generation, I just want to do it differently. And here they were, these young moms, and they were just starting their own businesses, and they just said, hey, no respect to our moms and our dads, but I want a different life. I just want I have different priorities. And I thought that was incredible. I mean, to be able to differentiate that, to be able to articulate that they recognize that as a generation, we just prioritize things different. Flexibility, for example, is incredibly important to Xers and to millennials as well. Being able to choose our own hours and be able to spend more time with our family and spend more time with our friends, or go and travel when we're able to. That's the stuff that's really important to us.
Do you think, just thinking on this subject some more, do you think that this generation is disrespectful, or do you believe that as a whole it is just a prioritization of these are the things that are important to us, and maybe boomers are offended because they're not the same priorities?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I hear that a lot, is that there's a feeling of older generations that feel disrespected. And I think that this is one of those instances where things get lost in communication, where as millennials, we're just going around doing our thing, communicating with people. Technology has been a great equalizer of the generations. Facebook started out as a way for college students to connect, and now the fastest growing group of people on Facebook are those that are 45 and older. And so now we're connecting with people on a platform that it has really just been this incredible equalizer. We're able to connect a lot more. And so for us, when we're, pinging our friends on Facebook Messenger, we think, well, if I'm doing that for my friends and then my boss is also on Facebook, why can't I just message him too? Isn't it just as fast? Well, for someone who's maybe 65, they're thinking, well, maybe in a social setting, that's one thing, but that's not appropriate for work. And it's just one of those culture gaps, I think, that millennials, and this is something we need to own, is that we are coming into a work environment that many of us are very unprepared for. I like to think of millennials as the most overly educated, underexperienced generation that is now walking into the workplace right now, because we've got degrees in everything. We've got masters and we've got JDs, and it's all impressive on paper, but if you don't know how to make a copy, and you don't know how to professionally answer the phone or what an email signature is, that's those little things that other generations have grown to really appreciate.
If we're not already, we're on track to be the most educated generation in the history of the world. But You're right. I mean, it's a lot of these basic tasks that frustrate these employers. And of course, here's the cycle that happens, right? They lash out on the web about how uneducated, this kid is and he can't do this and that. And so what does the kid do? He posts it to BuzzFeed, and then the original employer is getting hammered by the web. And it's just this funny cycle. I think there was somebody who was trying to connect with somebody on LinkedIn recently, and I'll post this on the show notes. But the post ended up going viral because she sent it over and posted it to Reddit and to BuzzFeed. And this girl was getting all kinds of emails and phone calls and the whole thing. And it ended up backfiring, and she issued an apology. But you're right. So as millennials, we've got to foundationally, we need to understand a lot of the basics as we're going to enter into the business world. And we're going to figure out how to best communicate with leaders today, which are, for the most part, boomers that are, I think, steadily moving on, and as Gen Xers are beginning to fill those roles. And the dynamic, would you agree, is going to change once boomers have moved out of the market and it's mostly Gen Xers?
Yeah, and I'm really intrigued to see what that's going to look like, because how generational cycles work is you've got usually ticks back and forth, kind of like a pendulum, between dominant generations and more passive generations. And so we're seeing that right now with millennials coming into the workplace we're the largest generation on the planet. There's 80 million of us. And then we've got the Xers, which are about a third of what boomers are. And then we've got boomers, which are just this massive generation as well. And so, for those of your listeners who have boomer parents, like my parents, they're not, as I like to say, aging gracefully. Like, my parents are in denial of the fact that people that were their age, 40 years ago were already, retiring quite comfortably. And my parents were like, I'm 65, but I've still got 20 years of work in me. So they're holding on to their positions a lot harder than those in the past. And so I think when we would normally be seeing a natural handoff from one generation to the next of leadership, we're seeing this older generation, and really this is the first time in history, where because we have such extended lifespans and because boomers are so dominant, they've worked so hard for their positions in business and in society, that they're not handing that off. And so the Xer generation is kind of stuck in this in-between of not necessarily having the upward mobility that was maybe promised to them or seemed possible to them when they were in their 20s and 30s. And now we've got this overly ambitious millennial generation coming up that's, button heads with them as well. And so this interrelationship is just really fascinating to me. As the three generations are really vying to have a seat at the table.
Perfect segue into one of your statements here, this idea of seat at the table. As millennials, we've got to find a way to put ourselves in positions to have that seat at the table. But what about managers that are dealing with millennials that are looking for that seat? What can they do?
Yeah, as millennials, what we want is to be taken seriously. Is we want, whether you're an intern or whether you've been there for 5 or 10 years, is one of the things that really motivates us, that I dig down to in the book, is feeling like we're able to contribute, knowing that what we're doing is making a difference. And so in my book and in my work with organizations is really helping managers understand how to incorporate the millennial drive in a way that is healthy and is really giving that millennial an opportunity to uniquely contribute while also being within a respectful relationship of the organization. And one story that I tell in my book is the CEO that I had connected with. They were in the middle of these negotiations on this project, and there were about 15 people in this room. They're around this huge table, and they had no idea what they were going to do next. And you're getting the senior VPs and all the account executives, and everyone's kind of shouting over each other, and they're trying to decide what to do on this project. And the CEO turns, and he looks at the intern in the room, like, "Hey, Ross, what do you think we should do?" Can you imagine the CEO is one of the largest privately owned companies in the world looking at this like 20-year-old kid and asking him what he should do. And I don't remember what the guy said, but the CEO then took into consideration as part of the solutions that they went forward with. And you better believe that guy at 20 years old felt like he was making a huge contribution. I mean, even if the CEO never even did anything with that information, the fact that he recognized the unique contribution, that the ideas and the individuality of that one millennial worker, you better believe that he's going to be there long term because he feels invested in. So a seat at the table isn't necessarily a senior level management position, but it could just be, hey, can you own this one project? I see that you're really passionate about community involvement. Would you be interested in starting a community engagement committee at our company? Or just finding ways to connect the millennial need for leadership, the millennial interest in making a difference, to an opportunity for them to really be invested in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the loyalty built in that simple exchange is a big deal. The idea that you're being heard, I think, is powerful. Even if you're an intern assigned to a project, it's an interesting dynamic I've seen. It's this idea of being a free-floating intern within the office, or the loyalty built in an intern that's been specifically assigned to an area they're passionate about or that they like. It may mean they're only actually dealing with that 10 hours a week. But, and of course the rest of the week they're taking care of all the normal intern duties. But there is so much loyalty built in that assignment in something you're passionate. I was just speaking to an intern who was very passionate about healthcare. And his boss said, hey, you're passionate about healthcare. I want you to spend some time on this. And he was only doing it a couple hours a week, but boy, he couldn't say good enough things about this member in Congress because he felt like he was really engaged in something he was passionate about. So there's a dynamic to that. I haven't fully thought it through, but let's move forward now. Hey, are we disloyal?
The disloyalty myth is one that I hear a ton about from hiring managers. So the truth in the myth is that the average millennial here in the DC area leaves after 11 months. 11 months. Ooh. It's not even a year. And I was reading this study. It was talking about how 75% of millennials have admitted that when the economy improves, they're getting another job. So although they may be sitting in that cubicle right now, you better believe that they're on monsters.com and all these other employment sites looking for other jobs. And the reason that millennials may appear disloyal is not because we just want to come in and use our companies for whatever they're worth and move on. Studies show that millennials don't have the same type of loyalty as other generations. It's not that we're not loyal. We have a different type of loyalty. We don't trust organizations like we used to. We don't trust name brands like we used to. We don't trust big corporations like we used to. And we see this politically with the whole, 99% thing. We don't trust big business. But who do we trust? We trust our friends. We trust our mentors. We trust our parents. That's why things like Yelp are so big with millennials, is because we trust other individuals. Their opinions drive what it is that we want to do. And so companies can build that into their loyalty structure, not by saying, well, I work at this particular company and I'm going to be loyal to them for 30 years, because we already know that millennials they're not going to stick around for 30 years, and that's okay. But can we get them to stick around for 5 years or maybe 10 years? Absolutely. Because when you tap into their loyalty to individuals, when you create a system where we feel invested in as individuals, and we've got mentors and we've got people that we work for, and we've got an awesome manager, or we've got relationships. I mean, the number one thing that millennials want when they show up to work is friends. Is a connection to another human being and feeling like people care. Like if I don't show up for a week, someone's going to notice, So the disloyalty myth is really just an opportunity for us to be able to make personal, real-life connections.
I'm seeing a trend develop, and maybe it'll change in the end, but this idea of a miscommunication among the generations between each of these five things that you touch on. But I would love for you, because I think you're right, but this approach to a job, you say in your book, is more like dating. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually find that I make a lot of analogies in my life to dating just because I feel like it just is a really good sociological study of how human beings actually work. Millennials are coming into the workforce looking for that first job, not quite sure what it is that they're expecting. So it's kind of like that first date. So you show up and you're not quite sure who this person is. You don't really know what you're looking for. Maybe you're not even looking for a relationship, but you're like, hey, you're kind of cute. Let's, figure this thing out. And we're not ready for something long term, but we're just saying, I want to see what's out there. That's the phase of life that millennials are in right now, is in that dating their career. They're not ready to make that lifelong commitment. They're not in the engagement phase. They're definitely not in the marriage phase. And that's why we're seeing a lot of that short-term approach, because many of us have been unprepared for the workforce. We just don't know what to expect. And so we're still trying to feel it out. And so I think that we're unknowingly breaking hearts out there when it comes to employers, because we just were like, oh, I didn't realize that you really wanted me to work 40 hours a week in this one particular area, or, oh, I didn't realize that that's not what I wanted in this kind of work relationship, or, that's not even a career that I'm interested in. But we're going out and we're trying these things, much like you would, going out on a first date or a second date. But then we're kind of quick to move on because we've got so many opportunities in front of us. Although we have just an incredibly challenging economic situation that we've moved in, that we've transitioned into this recession. However, we're constantly inundated with opportunity because of technology, because of our network, because we're seeing so much need out there, that we're thinking, well, if this isn't going to work out, there's plenty more fish in the sea.
Just to add on to that, this is another subject that I've sort of been thinking about, but you're right, with the internet coming to life as we were young kids, options everywhere. It's like, I can do this, I can do that. We talked about the other day how easy it is today to start a business. Mm-hmm. I joked the hardest part was picking the name. And it's that easy to form a limited liability company or whatever the case may be, but we have so many options. We can go in so many directions that a lot of and this may not be true of all of them, but a lot of millennials that I meet my age want to do a bunch of different things. In fact, I'm one of them. I want to have my hands in a bunch of different things. Whoa, you want to limit me, or you want to place me within the bounds of a contract? No, thank you. And so we've seen how that's affected the world. One of the things that caught my mind in your book here is you say, so what causes millennials to leave a company and what you can do about it? Number one says, it depends on the position, it depends on the industry, and it depends on your own level of expectation. This is a complicated subject. Hiring managers are out there. How do they, let's presume that most of them are Gen Xers in these positions of hiring. How do they, or what can they do to lock down millennials in these jobs that hopefully last longer than 11 months?
Yeah, I love that I give kind of that lawyer's answer, right? Of it depends. But it really does. I mean, if you're looking to bring around someone long term, you've got to make sure that it's going to be a right culture fit. And like Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great, it's, you got to hire slow. You got to get the right people on the bus. And then you have to determine what seat they need to have on that bus. And hiring managers, a lot of times, are getting inundated with all these resumes of these seemingly qualified millennials, but there's so much more to us than, just that text on the page. And so connecting with what is the unique motivating drive of that millennial employee, because I'm a manager myself. I can teach someone the skills to succeed on the job, but I can't teach someone to have the same kind of priorities, the same work ethic, or the same kind of excitement about the mission of the organization. And that's really where hiring managers can connect with that individual. So the first one I talk about is, it depends on the position, because if you're going to be bringing in someone at an entry-level position, you don't want them to stay at that entry-level position for more than a year. Or as a typical millennial, they're going to be moving on. So what you can do is you connect with them where they're at, and you help explain to them in very clear terms how this is just an entry-level position, but how you're going to help them in this position to then use it as a lily pad to get to the next position that they're interested in, or as a learning experience to gain the skills that they need to be successful. That's one of the huge motivators of millennials, is constantly learning. We're addicted to education. That's why we're always on looking up YouTube videos. That's why TED Talks are so popular. We're wanting to constantly be challenged and grow personally and professionally. And if you bring in someone at that lower level, they're going to be able to then see themselves with the company more long term, because they're going to say, hey, they're investing in me, I want to invest in them as well.
Yeah, and in fact, in big, bold letters here, you have millennials will invest in you when you invest in them. And just thinking that through, I can imagine a boomer reading this and going, well, I don't have time to invest in them. Somebody else can invest in them. But I think you speak about, and I'm not sure what part of this book, but I remember the costs to losing a millennial. I mean, there's a financial number that you have to go through into hiring somebody else, and then there's somebody outside of that position, and so on and so forth. So for those of you boomers and Gen Xers that are listening out there, hey, money talks. So listen, and let's make sure that we engage in this conversation. Let's move on, though. Millennials are independent. That doesn't sound so bad to me.
Oh, you're just such a typical millennial. I'm just kidding. Which it's pretty funny. I don't know if your friends do this to you as well, but whenever I do something that's really millennial, my friends will be like, Gabrielle, #millennial, when I have those very typical millennial moments, which I feel like are growing. The more that I study about millennials, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty typical. So I feel like that makes me a pretty good advocate for us. But yeah, this myth that we're independent. And by that I mean that we don't want to work with anybody who doesn't look like us or who doesn't act like us. And those in older generations oftentimes are intimidated when it comes to connecting with this younger generation, because they think, well, they don't want to work with me. They don't want to connect with me. They don't want to learn anything from me if I don't look like them or I don't act like them, or maybe if I looked a little bit more hip, or, if I had tighter jeans, or, if I looked more modern. And the reality is that millennials really do want to connect with people. Diversity is a huge priority for us. If I walk into a room and everybody looks just like me, it's like, well, this is kind of boring. Granted, I have red hair, so if I do walk into a room and there's another redhead, I get really excited, but that's only because there's less than 2% of us in the world. But that aside, millennials, we want to work across generations, because we've been placed on teams our entire life, whether that was a soccer team or for the science fair or, in school to work on projects. We're used to working in teams and being able to say, hey, what are you good at? What do you like working on? How can we use that specific skill set to get our job done? And we want to do that with other generations, but so often we just don't know how.
Yeah, and I love you have another bold outline here in terms of, craving mentors. It's something that comes up. Every single person that I interview says mentors are so important. In fact, Theon Hill, a couple of podcasts earlier, he says, listen, when I find somebody, I will get on a plane if necessary and fly out to wherever they are, and he goes cross country all the way to LA, out to California, just to find a moment to meet with them and connect with them. And actually, he's got some amazing mentors in his life. But I really, as a sports nut growing up and playing sports my whole life, you say in here, we have a helmet, pads, and the ball. Now we need someone to show us how to play the game. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and as an athlete myself, I played I played competitive tennis for a number of years, and so I definitely saw that a lot, and ended up coaching as well, and seeing the huge need for having someone come in and show you how to use the equipment. So by that I mean we've got the education, we've got the theory, we know that something needs to be done. Oftentimes we even know what needs to be done. We just need to know how to do it. Many millennials don't want to learn the hard way. We're not about, I'll figure it out on my own and I'll let you know later. For me, I want someone who's done it, who's made the mistakes, who's got the experience to come in and say, hey, guess what, Gabrielle, tried that, didn't work. Not a good idea. Do not do that. I don't want to waste my time making those types of mistakes. And so looking for opportunities to have mentors come in, and mentorship looks different. I help organizations put together mentoring programs that fit their own needs. So for example, when a lot of times people think of mentors, they're like, oh my goodness, am I going to have to get together with this person for an hour every single week and have them come in and talk about what's going on in their lives? Like, no, maybe, but probably not. I mean, mentorship it could just be that hour-long conversation every couple of months, just checking in, or it could be over email or Skype, or it could be, a virtual type of mentorship. But having these intentional opportunities where young people are able to come in and connect with Xers and with boomers and with those of the traditionalist / silent generation, people who have gone before us and have done incredible things, come in and say, hey, use these best practices. These are things that I've learned. Let me help you not make the same mistakes that I made so that you can be more successful. One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Edison, and he said, I can only see as far as I do because I stand on the shoulder of giants. And I think that's so profound. If we think of each generation as standing on the shoulders of the other, you really see that importance of the intergenerational dynamics working together.
That's an awesome quote. Just hearing that gets me kind of excited. So I love it. Talk a little bit, because we spoke about this, the idea of mentoring and coaching. Millennials, I believe you're going to say, we're looking for this concept of coaching me through it.
Yeah, what I talk about in my book is that millennials don't necessarily want to be led. We don't want to be managed. We want to be coached. And we want to be related to in a way where we have an individual come alongside us. We don't want someone to tell us what to do. We want to have them show us how to do it alongside us and really doing life with us. We're a very experiential generation. We want to get our hands dirty. We want to touch it and feel it and experience it with other people, not just on our own. And so when you're looking at creating, whether it's a functional team on an organization or, working towards a particular project, you want to be in a situation where millennials feel like they've got this exchange. I mean, as a former coach, I came in and I coached high school boys tennis when I was, 19 years old. You can only imagine the challenge of trying to wield that. But it was an exchange, and I had to earn their respect by being able to show my expertise. But there was a relationship that was built because I was on the bus with the guys. I was there cleaning up after the games. I was driving them home after practice. I was doing life with them. It wasn't a flyby. And so when you're looking at those different levels of mentorship like I was talking about, we really do want to have someone in our life be that coach who's doing that life with us, showing us alongside how to be successful.
Very rarely will I meet somebody that is willing to say, no, I'll figure it out and I'll go it on my own. I think when you finally understand that concept of, boy, there is a wealth of experience and knowledge and mistakes that if I can avoid making, man, that would be a blessing. Mm-hmm. And so it's very rare that I say that. I actually laughed out loud when I saw this fact number 3, because it's true. I've done what you've written in here. And fact number 3 in this chapter says, we'll admit it. We're just like our parents. And I have taken out my phone and I've snapped a photo of something and said, "Hey, Dad," or "Hey, Mom," or what's that about? Or we're okay with with letting our parents know. How did that come about?
I know. It's pretty funny. Many of us have, not all of us, but many of us have really incredible relationships with our parents, which I think is a huge blessing. I mean, I think it's incredible. But I think that it's also been a challenge in that many of us have such a collegial relationship with our parents. Like, hey, my mom's my best friend. I was joking around with my roommate. I'm like, I think that I talked to my mom about 10 times yesterday on the phone. And I was like, I don't really think that was necessary. At this point, my mom was like, should I just stay on the phone with you? Because you keep calling me. I'm like, I know. We have this really great relationship with our parents. And like I had kind of talked about before, is it's kind of that dominant generation. We have so much in common because many of us are at the same life cycle. Many boomers right now are now looking for jobs the same time that their millennial kids are looking for jobs. Many of them are downsizing at the same time that millennials are downsizing. Many of them are making life transitions, whether that be marriage and divorce at the same time, or graduating from college and having the empty nest syndrome. There's parallel life cycles that are going on with both generations, which I think is really powerful because I think that it shows that we have a lot more in common than we think, and that there's more that brings us together than that brings us apart. But I think it's hilarious. I mean, I love the same kind of music as my dad. Like when I hang out with my parents, like we end up like going and doing the same thing that me and my friends would do. So it's that concept that we're really different, that maybe as teenagers we were like, no, I'm never going to be like you, Dad. Now I'm like, actually, my parents were pretty cool. And I readily will admit that now. I absolutely will.
Well, it's funny. I guess I noticed I sort of made that type of connection probably in my early 20s. And then now my sister, who is in her early 20s, I was back home for Christmas, and she kind of said the same thing, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to take your shoes," or, listening to the same music or whatever it may be. And it seems to be, once we've gone and done college for a little bit, we come back and we really appreciate, not in every case, but appreciate our parents and find that we are very similar. So that's always always a funny thing. You get a good laugh, and then of course parents are on technology, and so we're more connected than ever. I am addicted to technology. I will say it. My phone is always within 5 feet of me. I have an iPad. I've got a MacBook. My wife has got a MacBook. We are connected to the hilt. Consider myself a typical millennial. We are addicted to technology. Lay out that chapter for me a little bit and what you say about being addicted.
Yeah, I include this in the book just because it's so incredibly obvious. However, I'll admit right now, it's not a myth. It is absolutely fact that we are totally and truly addicted to technology. And much like you, it's like if I don't know where my phone is, every couple minutes I'm like looking around, and it's this need to constantly be connected to the world, feeling like, what if something were to happen? How would I stay connected? How do I know what's going on in other people's lives? How do I know what's going on in the news? How am I going to get connected to my boss if something goes on and I don't have my email? So there's all of these what ifs that in reality, if you didn't have your phone, everything would probably be just okay. I share a story in the book about how I was out in Lake Tahoe at a friend's wedding, and my phone was stolen. And at the first couple of hours, I was a mess. I was like, there could be an avalanche, and then I'm dead, and my family doesn't know. Or like, how am I supposed to find my way back to the hotel? Or where's the nearest Starbucks? Like, I had all of these, very important questions running through my mind. And finally, I just resolved, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, I emailed my family, said, hey, just to let you know, my phone's not here. I'll see you in a couple of days. And I went for 2 days without a phone. And it was like this cleansing experience, and a little stressful sometimes, but for the most part, it was like, wow, I can do this. But the reality is that in our modern world, everything is moving so quickly, and being inundated with all of this information constantly, we want to have that sense of connection to those that we care about, and know the most important things. And so what I talk about in the chapter on being addicted to technology is, yes, you can see it as a challenge, but you can also see it as just our need for relationship. I have my phone around me all the time, not because something bad that I need it as my lifeline, but it's because I want to know that the people I care about are safe. I want to know that I can call my friends, and that I can be connected to people that I don't see all of the time. And I think that's when you understand the core motivator behind why we want to be connected, I think that it's a really powerful force for good rather than just a challenge.
It's interesting because you're right. I think that's what the debate is. We're trying to figure out, is it because of this, the new thing, FOMO, fear of missing out? Is it because we want to be connected to the people we care about the most? I'm not sure I think I lean more towards what you're saying. It's this idea of, if something were to happen, I'm accessible. My parents live in Florida. So, my lifeline, if anything were to happen, is going to come through my cell phone most likely. And I always kind of want to have it on me. It's sort of the reason why, I want to say 99% of millennials don't turn their phone off at night in case, whatever crazy scenario, right, we come up with. And if there isn't we'll come up with one. But I think you're right. And as you were actually saying that, I was thinking of, the ghost buzz, to where you feel like your phone is, your leg, there's a vibration or something in your leg. Oh, it's my phone going off. Well, you go to check and your phone's not in your pocket. That was just a funny thing.
I was going to say, it was like in the middle of that, were you checking your phone?
Where is my phone? Hold on. Okay, I found it. One of the things I also found interesting in this chapter is fact number 1, where you say technology has changed the way that millennials define work. Talk about that. I mean, with Google and the internet, the whole business sector, I think, is radically changed.
Oh, and constantly changing, and who knows what it's going to look like even in a year. I mean, now because of technology, we've got, Google Hangouts amongst, CEOs and interns alike. I mean, everybody's using technology to further their network and really expand their business as well, and really unique in different ways. I talk about in my book how technology is really like the millennial open door policy. It basically, if I have my Facebook Messenger up or GChat up during the day, if my boomer boss walks by, he's thinking, wow, Gabrielle's not doing a whole lot of work now. But the reality is I'm not on there just talking to my friends about what we're going to do this weekend. It's like I want to constantly be accessible to those that I work with. It's a lot easier for me to just shoot over an email or shoot a quick message to someone rather than getting up and having to walk over there. So we relate in a completely different way to technology, and we use it in different ways as well. So one thing that Xers really were really on the forefront of incorporating technology into the modern workforce, and just how work is totally different. I mean, take the whole Silicon Valley boom over the last 25 years. It was really pushed by those Xers and even some boomers who really said, hey, we can change the way that work looks. So now millennials, we're coming up into it and we're saying, well, if I don't really produce anything with my hands like maybe, my parents or my grandparents did, I'm just as productive if everything that I'm producing is on this computer, is on my laptop. Why can't I do it from a coffee shop or from home or from some remote location? If I'm still getting my work done like I would be getting done if I'm sitting 5 feet from you, why can't I be 5 miles from you or 500 miles if this product is the same at the end of the day?
Sure, and that's given huge rise to telecommunication and working from anywhere. It's one of the beautiful things. The internet has freed us from specific geographic locations. So, I mean, listen, I'm a big fan of it, but I am a typical millennial.
As we talk over Skype.
That's right, exactly, as we talk over Skype. Can you kind of touch on, because you did a little bit, but there's a section also here in the book, we want to balance screen time and face time. When you hear, oh, millennials technology, they just want to be in front of their computers and do their work. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, it's one of those ironies, I think, is that, yes, we really appreciate technology and being able to use our, like, I love FaceTime, I love, Skype and being able to connect with people that I'm not able to see in person. But if I have that opportunity to go out to coffee or go out to lunch or dinner with someone, I'm going to take that, because I realize that in this world where we're constantly inundated from marketing campaigns to ads, getting pop-ups all over the place, we really crave that human interaction. At the end of the day, we still need to be touched, to be interactive in a real way. And so I really encourage managers of all ages to find ways to draw your millennial out from their little technology cocoon and say, hey, all right, we're all going to get together, and you're not going to sit and have lunch in front of your computer, which is like, I'm totally guilty of that. I eat lunch at my desk all of the time because why not? But being able to remove yourself from it and interact, because that's where relationships are formed, and that's where we really do life together. And that's not a millennial thing. That's just a human thing. That's just how we're created. And so seeking opportunities to be able to make that human connection, I think is really important. And I encourage managers to do that, even if it's a little uncomfortable at first, even if it's not really the company culture. So like if you're in a tech industry company, find ways to go out, maybe go out to lunch, or, host an office happy hour, or, office Olympics or something, but do something interactive where people are feeling like it's important to be present in the office.
It's also interesting, too, because we see how Google interacts with their employees, right? And Google has found ways to retain and to capture these, the brightest today. And they don't have, the typical office format.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's sitting on, like, bean bags, and it's all, like, moving around all the time. And, Google actually had, LinkedIn did this as well, is a bring your parent to work day.
What?
2 years ago, kid you not. And because they realize that many of their employees are millennials, and like us, they have good relationships with their parents. And it's like, hey, it's kind of like bring your parent to school day. It's like, hey, mom and dad, come see the hard work that I've done. And I actually asked my parents not too long ago, I said, if I was working at a company and they had a bring your parent to work day, would you think that's ridiculous, or would you go? Just kind of floated it out there. Just asked my mom, and she's like, she looked at me and she goes, oh my goodness, I would love it. I would love to come and see what you do. And it made me laugh so hard, because it wasn't weird for her. It wouldn't be weird for her to go visit her grown daughter at work and, learn what she did, because, I mean, for many of our parents, it was like, hey, I worked hard to, get you into college, and to, I remember
it's true.
You on Little League, and, like, there's just this affinity to watching their little kids grow up. So pretty funny.
It's funny you mentioned that. I could hear my dad's voice in my head. Hey, I want to see my payoff. I want to see what you're doing.
Right. I know.
What we were talking about, and one of the great secrets of millennials is this idea of just Googling something. I can remember helping my dad start up with his law firm, and there were specific questions I didn't know, but I just knew, hey, okay, I'll figure it out type of thing. And I would Google it. I'd figure out how to do the process. I would do it, and then I'd go back and I'd say, okay, this is done. This is how you operate. And I remember him looking at me one day going, how did you do that? I don't understand how you guys...
Right?
How did you even come up with that? And it was so funny. It became a regular joke that I used to say to him, well, don't worry about it. It's complicated. So there you go. Everybody's listening. That's the millennial secret. We know how to Google things. We know how to find resources. But I just wanted to get that story in there, and I wanted to make sure we wrap this up soon. We've got myth number 5. Millennials are unmotivated.
Yeah, this is probably the other largest myth that we come across, and it's also really just the largest misunderstanding, I think, is that millennials aren't motivated to do anything. You hire us, you get us on the team, and we're just going to sit there. It's like, I don't really feel like doing it, or I'm not really going to try that hard. But the reality is that millennials are the most driven, passionate, creative employees that you're ever going to have if you can just tap into what really motivates them. And it really comes down to not working within the stereotype of every single millennial is going to need X or is going to be interested in Y. It's sitting down with that millennial, understanding that one of the biggest millennial fears is that we're like everybody else. I mean, we're the largest generation on the planet, and we know it, and we've got a lot of pride in that. But that also freaks us out because we're like, there's a lot of us, so that's why you're seeing the rise in selfies, and, we're like, there's still me. I'm still an individual. And so as a manager, you sit down and you start talking to them about, hey, this is what really motivates you. Maybe it's creating your own title at work that really reflects your unique contribution. Or maybe it's creating a different work schedule where, you work, 4 days and you work more hours during those days and you have another day off. Or what is it that's going to work for you? And also, too, connecting the unique motivators. What is it about the organization that really inspires the millennial as well? That really connects with their own personal sense of accomplishment and worth. If you tap into those simple things, millennials are just gonna take off. And your biggest problem is really just gonna be giving them enough work, because they're just gonna be, going all the time. And there's really, once you turn that millennial fire on, it's really difficult to turn it off.
Awesome. I love it. Millennial fire. Do me a favor, affirm or reject this proposition. It's just kind of been running through my mind. This concept of a cookie cutter anything millennials seem to reject, even at face value.
Absolutely. We want to customize everything, right? So, I don't want just a normal iPhone. I'm going to customize everything. It's got all my apps on it. Everything is unique. You pick it up and it's Gabrielle all over. It's the same thing with everything from our cars to our Facebook pages. Everything is custom and is unique, because cookie cutter just doesn't really do it for us.
Yeah, definitely doesn't do it for us. Gabrielle, thank you for your time today. If you're willing in the future, this is such a great content-rich conversation that there is so much more I know that you can share. Maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future. But you have your website, millennialsolution.com. How can people get a hold of you? Or even if there are firms that want to reach out to you and hire you to put together, like, say, a mentoring program, how can people best reach you?
Yeah, a couple of different ways. First is from my website, millennialsolution.com, or my email, Gabrielle@millennialsolution.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at saysgabrielle.
Awesome. Well, you got to have a Twitter handle. You're a millennial.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, Gabrielle, thanks again. I look forward to getting this podcast up. This has been such a good conversation, and we will speak soon.
Thanks so much.
Special thanks to Gabrielle Jackson for spending over an hour with me talking about millennials and these 5 myths. I would encourage you to hop on Amazon right now and purchase her book. You won't regret the read. Think about this with me for a minute. We have earned that reputation as millennials. Every generation has to battle against generational stereotypes. Whether you agree with them or not, generationally you'll be labeled. And as a millennial leader, you'll have the opportunity to shape and define your generation. The question is, what part are you going to play in that? I hope you'll step forward and be that leader this generation needs. Start today.